Hey YouTube, Gordon Miller here. Okay, so we're continuing the mentor series, and my next mentor is one from my college days. After I'd just spoken about George Squires and Ron Smith, who were my English teachers in middle school and high school at St. Christopher's School here in Richmond. I decided that instead of going to aerospace engineering school at Embry-Riddle, which I had gotten accepted early decision to, that school is like 3 miles from the beach and off of turn 3 at Daytona. So with my love of cars and my interest in the beach and of course, scantily clad beautiful women on the beach in bikinis, not exactly the most conducive environment to getting an undergraduate degree in. So I knew well enough that I would be distracted by the beach and distracted by the cars and distracted by everything else, that I knew that Embry-Riddle was going to be a bad choice. And so I made the choice to, I knew a lot about engineering at the time, and aerospace engineering allowed me to apply my math and other skills that I had that were considerable in a specific direction. And I really wanted to do automotive design. Is actually how I started out. And the Pasadena School of Design, the Art Center School of Design in Pasadena, was a phenomenal thing. All of the major auto manufacturers use their studios in California to design cars. And but I found that that a number of successful car designers were actually aerospace engineers. They had learned, and also from the racing industry, a lot of race teams used aerospace and aeronautical engineers to design the actual shape of the cars. So that's kind of what I was interested in at the time. And but I decided that art school. So I knew a lot about engineering, but I didn't know a lot about art and design. And I realized on my spring break field trip to New York, where I got a chance to, this is in high school. I went with my girlfriend and a group of other people from the class in high school, and we took plays and museums and went all around the city. And I got a chance to understand that there was an emerging area of art and design that was about to intersect with engineering. And so that's where I decided to focus on art first, on design, and then apply design in whatever fashion I could after that. And so that's how that whole thing got started. So I worked on my Bachelor's of Fine Art and Design from Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, here in Richmond, Virginia. And one of my senior level studio teachers, I took furniture design from her in my junior year, I think, and I took my senior year studio from her. So I had her for 2 whole years, and was Han Schroeder. So Han was the daughter of the famous Schroeder, who owned the Schroeder House in Utrecht in Holland, that Gerrit Rietveld designed. One of the masterpieces of modern architecture with movable walls and things like that. Gerrit Rietveld actually had his workshop in the basement of the house. And it's been reported that Han was actually the actual daughter of Gerrit Rietveld. Now, Han's mother was never married to Gerrit. They were close friends. It's been rumored that they had a romantic relationship. And since Gerrit lived downstairs, there's the potential that may indeed be true. So, and in fact, if you look at Han, her photos look very similar. There's a family resemblance, let's say, to Gerrit Rietveld. So, Han worked as an architect in Gerrit Rietveld's practice afterwards, and then she started her own architectural practice. And she was the one that encouraged me to apply design in the direction of engineering through the use of architecture. And so when I was looking at possibly going to graduate school, she is the one who encouraged me to look at either UVA, University of Virginia, or Virginia Tech. And because the Virginia Tech program was modeled after the Harvard School of Design model for the Bauhaus School of Architecture, she had recommended that I'd go there. And I had no idea, but she always had plans of retiring shortly after I was going to leave to go to grad school. And she and her lifelong partner were going to retire there. They have great uh, facilities for elder care, and her partner was very sick. And Han eventually moved to Blacksburg while I was still there. And she would stop by the studios and visit me and things like that when I was there and look at my stuff. And she's also the one that encouraged me to focus on the use of computers in design. That at that time, my undergraduate degree went from 83 to 87, and I bought my first Macintosh in 84, beginning of 85, in January of 85. And so it had been a year since the Mac had been introduced, and I bought my own Mac. I believe my mom actually helped. It was like $2,800 or something. It was an enormous amount of money back then, and still an enormous amount of money. But in today's money, it's probably $5,000 or $6,000. So it's an enormous expense. But I learned so much in those early days, and I demonstrated that use in college. And so Han had said that there are new technologies in every generation that make a huge difference, a huge impact in that generation's in what that generation does. For her in the 1920s, which is when she grew up in that environment of the Bauhaus School of Architecture and things like that. In the 1920s, the technology that was so revolutionary was concrete. Oddly enough, we take concrete for granted most of the time these days, but then there was a whole new unexplored world about how to curve concrete, how to make it stronger, how to shape it, how to color it, and a variety of things. And so the really adventurous architects were going after these new technologies and incorporating concrete into the design. So she encouraged me to continue to focus on architecture as the way of combining engineering and design. And then with the intention that I would go on to do my PhD work in a specific engineering area. And I focused on the work that we did in computers. And when I got to Virginia Tech in 87 or 88, in 88, they were just getting grants for new computers that were buying these Macintosh 2 machines that were color and things like that. There was a Mac SE color that I think was there as well. And color was a whole new thing. It was all using 256-bit color. So it was all 8-bit color. I mean, 8-bit, 256 colors. So, it was a real, uh, it was a real art as well as a real science and a discipline to all this. And I realized that not a whole lot of people knew any more than I did about it, actually. So for me, it was an opportunity to say, okay, well, I am going to pioneer or blaze the trail or whatever a number of these things and learn the stuff as we go along, maybe even create my own contributions in some areas. And that's what I did. I mean, I spent my time in graduate school focused on where the opportunities were, and that's really the kind of thing that I enjoyed doing. And in my dissertation for my master's thesis, it focused on, it was called Escaping Flatland, and it took 14 different tools, software tools, and looked at ways to be able to create a production workflow based on all those tools, and connect them in various ways to do things that nobody had ever done before. It just wasn't being done. And so there were two or three major techniques that ended up becoming prevalent after my use of them in the dissertation. Dissertation's on file at or my master's thesis is on file at Virginia Tech. You can look it up. But the process that I had created was one where I began to understand the value of both technology platforms and tools that did very specific jobs, as well as how to use tools in unconventional ways. So this tool was not really meant to be used this way, but I'm going to use it this way because it has an import or export feature that I need, and it can get the job done. So that was great. I loved it. So that was kind of my focus, and it also was the kind of thing where I had this electronic thesis and dissertation work that I had also much material for my master's thesis that they wanted you to produce a book, which I produced, but the book that you produced um, only captures a small fraction of what it is that people actually did. There's a whole bunch of work product that was in a digital world, and so I was the one who, after I graduated my master's program and was offered the opportunity to become faculty, I pushed for electronic thesis and dissertations. And I don't know that the materials that I created are on file digitally, because it took years. It took a few years for that whole process to begin. But ultimately, before I left the university 5 years later, when my contract was up, and I decided not to renew my contract and focus on building my company, the those electronic theses and dissertations had become commonplace and a requirement, actually. So it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I really owe that whole process to Hans Schroeder. She really was a phenomenal person, a phenomenal architect, and I loved her dearly. I mean, she was a phenomenal, terrific influence. I still remember my fondest memory of Han is when I did this project. I was going to school at the same time, so I was working like 60 hours a week, and I was going to school full time also, and because I was working in my father's company, like I had done a video or so back about my father. So I had this model that we were supposed to build, and it was the corner of a house. And so the idea is that you've got a corner, and you have to build out this whole 2-story house with balsa wood, and it had to be to scale, and things like that. And so Han gave me an A, because if I, even though it wasn't complete and everything else, it was like, it was supposed to be huge, and I did a fraction of whatever it was. I did one of everything. So, and everything I did correctly. So, and the other students complained. They're like, I got a C, but Gordon didn't even complete his, and he got an A. I don't get that. It's just favoritism. And honestly, it probably was favoritism to a large degree. I mean, I think it would probably have crushed Han's soul to give me a C or a D. But Han told the other kids that she's like, look, what Gordon did, he did 100% correct. There's not a single error or anything. So if he had had the additional time, I'm confident that the rest of the model would have been as accurate and complete as the piece he did. He did every single thing on the checklist. He did it all 100% correct, and it's all to scale, and it's all perfect. But it's not all there. And she said, if you all had done that, and of course, a lot of my classmates had like rushed quickly to get something done. They wanted to build the whole, section of wall that, I think it was like a 4 foot by 4 foot, or 4 foot by 8 foot, 2-story high. So it was like 16 foot to scale, section of this house. And so, probably the model was going to be like, 8 inches for the 8 foot floor height. So it was like 16 inches tall, and it would have been like 8 inches wide or something like that, 6 or 8 inches wide. So, but they had rushed through it to get it done, and they had not done everything on the checklist, or they had not done the stuff they did right because they were doing it so quickly, because they waited until the last minute to do it. I was building mine as we went along. I just didn't have enough time to do it with the level of accuracy that I did. And so Han gave me an A and made me the enemy of everybody else in my class. So, they hated me after that. So it's like, okay, well, I know, I'm sorry. I mean, I can't really, I can't do anything about how she hands out her grades. Was it fair? No, probably not. And, Han's been dead for, I don't know, probably going on 20 years. All of her work is in an archive of the Archive of Women Architects at Virginia Tech. And, she never did anything really notable, nothing really famous in terms of architecture. I think her architecture work was really good. But I think she had a better sense of people. And I think she was a great person. And I think she was a good instructor. We had in our furniture design class, we had a thing where we had to do an ugly vanity. And of course, everybody's ugly vanity, they were all cliches about what ugly was. And but everybody had spent so much time thinking about what it was, what to do in order to make it ugly, that everything that people did was really beautiful. And so, her whole point was that, if you're going to spend a great deal of time on something, then it's very difficult to make something really truly ugly, because you're going to end up, so focused on it that you're going to make it beautiful. And it was an interesting, interesting life lessons. I mean, Hans Schroeder was an amazing woman, and and her sexual orientation was always controversial, even in the 80s, and things like that. Not so controversial now. And but she was a wonderful human being, and she was a wonderful architect, and a great instructor, and a phenomenal mentor to me. So thanks, Han. I love you, and I hope to see you again one day. Thanks.